Welcome to the Unleash This podcast. This will be our 12th session of this podcast series entitled E-commerce Pain Points Solved with CommerceWeavers. With our guest today, with Tym Stengert at CommerceWeaver, a Silius and Symphony-based shop based in Europe. Tym, thanks for stopping by in our podcast series. It's great for you to be here, and would welcome an introduction of yourself in your own words.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. What can I say? I think you pretty much covered everything. So CommerceWeavers is a little agency from Poland. We have experience in e-commerce for 7 to 10 years, depending on the teammate here. And we have just started collaboration in between two companies. So I think this is where we should start from our partnership, right?
Yeah, it's a great way to start our conversation. I think, we're announcing today, of course, the partnership between Unleash Technologies and CommerceWeaver, particularly focused on Silius technologies and the development of Silius technologies. I know you're based in Europe, we're based in North America, so it's a marriage made in heaven, really, to really leverage your technology to expand the gospel, right, of Silius and Symphony into North America. And that'll only help both CommerceWeaver and Unleashed moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's particularly important is to explain what is Silius, what is Symphony. But I think we'll get to this point because probably American market isn't that familiar with these technologies. So we are more than happy to bring something that is born in Europe to the US thanks to this partnership. And yeah, ever since we met each other, I think it was a great synergy, great chemistry on all levels, business, technology-wise, personal level. So I'm really happy that we have finally formed it and can announce it to the world.
Absolutely. Unleashed, I can share a little bit about Unleashed. I think our audience knows us a little bit, because we have been around for 15 plus years as a technology business, really spreading the sort of gospel and the good work of Silius and Symphony, in North America. Can you share a little bit about CommerceWeaver and its history and what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, and I think I would like to underline it's CommerceWeavers because there are many weavers, not only one. And what do we do? Actually, so our history is pretty straightforward. As very young people, we started working on Silius, which is one of the most popular open source e-commerce frameworks out there. By most popular, I think you could count around 20 popular e-commerce platforms globally, and I think we are in this 20. And last year we decided to spin off from the Silius company and bootstrap our own business, CommerceWeavers, which is an agency basically delivering Silius and Symphony related services. So project development, consultation, training, everything related to Silius Symphony API platform, which is on our technology based on the Symphony framework, and the general consultation in e-commerce, focusing on B2B, which is, by the way, the perfect scenario for Silius because it's very complex and Silius allows for very custom developments. So this is our history. Personally, I have like 7 years experience in e-commerce. My colleagues have 10. They are developers that have basically joined the development of Silius at the very early stage. So you can say that they are like the best Silius developers in the world, core team members. So people who actually develop and maintain this technology product every day. And I'm just the business guy, I'm just the business guy who tries to make sales, talk about it, promote it, explain, educate, so everything around it.
No, based on my experience with you, you're not just the business guy. You're like a visionary. I think, you're able to kind of communicate, those sort of more challenging technical aspects, I think, into sort of layman terms, right? Into a language that others understand, including myself. You mentioned B2B e-commerce, right? And it's really why we're partnering together, right? Unleash and CommerceWeaver, because we are so focused on the B2B e-commerce space, and Silius is so suitable, so perfect for that market. What makes B2B e-commerce unique, and why is it more complicated than B2C e-commerce? I mean, from our experience, we specialize in B2B, and a lot of consumers to B2B, B2C will see like Amazon, or will see these sites essentially, and they'll have a cart. But there's more to that, right? In B2B e-commerce. I mean, you've got, yes, the product detail page, you've got the cart, but you also have a configurator, right, which tailors the product. So I'd love to get your insight there on what makes B2B so different.
Well, actually, this is a tricky question because on one hand, I could tell that B2B e-commerce is becoming more and more similar to B2C e-commerce, but this is just recently. But in general, over the years, the difference was big because of the fact that B2B e-commerce simply tries to combine all the processes that you have in producing, manufacturing, and distributing things, and like it's in the easiest possible words to say that, to explain that. And when you imagine manufacturing, even to produce one simple pipe, for example, you need so many different things that come into place. And e-commerce is just a part of it, where you have to sell it to someone. So the sales in B2B were happening, via sales reps, for example, for years, or via normal physical meetings, And B2B e-commerce is trying to take all these processes and make them digital. So you have 3D product configurators, as you said. I have seen like the entire bus being complied together on the 3D configurator with the help of a sales rep on a phone, clicking through the system with the shared screen together with the customer on the other end of the camera. And this is B2B e-commerce. So you have different tools to achieve a very complex order. You cannot just order a t-shirt. You order a complex machine or thousands of, I don't know, gear or something that is so ugly and I don't know. These are things that you would never think that the people sell and people buy, but they are all around us. And B2B e-commerce is trying to deliver them to us, actually, to people that use these things.
Yeah, and I think that's your point, right? There's a complexity there. There's so many moving parts, right?
Yeah,
and I know when we were sort of talking before, people don't know that the B2B market is actually much bigger than the B2C e-commerce market, right? That speaks to the complexity. That speaks to the ecosystem that's so much bigger, right?
absolutely.
Than in
Like,
the B2C.
depending on the research, it's said that it's like 2 to even 5 times bigger than B2C. And you would say probably luxury fashion is the biggest, for example. But it's not. So all these things that I said, like park machines ordering gear or parts for their systems. So a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think even that needs to be sold and bought.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the numbers, to your point, the numbers sort of bear this out, right? The global B2B e-commerce market is valued, will jump from 8 trillion to 18 trillion. I mean, 20% CAGR growth. There's just no question. And I think, I think the statistic that really surprised me, right, was that, something like only 8% of manufacturers have any e-commerce presence. That to me is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, and I think it comes from the fact that actually manufacturers never really wanted to do commerce, not even e-commerce, because they prefer to have the distribution chains, right? But when they see that it's easier to sell, and maybe you can omit the distribution chain, so you can actually have more money for yourself, then they think, hey, maybe, okay, the channel sales through distributors is nice, but maybe let's open another channel, which is a direct sales. And this is mind-blowing. I mean, it's like, if it's even 10% now, because 8% I think was last year, we still have 90% to digitalize. So for companies like ourselves, it's a big market and a big space to help.
And, it's interesting. I know we haven't talked about this before, but I do wonder, whether the recent years around the pandemic, the supply chain challenges that manufacturers have had, that has, really sparked a reexamination of the importance of B2B e-commerce for a lot of manufacturers, right? And maybe a reliance less on, yes, you need to have your distributors. You don't want to irritate them, but also thinking about, building, redundancy, building contingency into the supply chain where you can directly, interact with the consumer, right? And reduce the time to market and just eliminate those variables, right, in between.
Yeah, especially if you think about logistics and the fact that most of the B2B production happened intercontinentally, and now you have this phenomenon of getting it closer together, so that the whole production happens in one country. I think US also has such a regulations coming, or at least there is a trend of trying to make the whole production in one country for some companies. So yeah, B2B commerce can help with that. So it can help you make the sale and order delivered faster within the same region, country, continent.
Yeah, I know. I know. There's sort of geopolitical elements to that too, with the role of China, and I think this trend I think you're referring to is inshoring, nearshoring, right? Which, interestingly enough, makes B2B e-commerce even more important to that development, right? It's almost plays a much more crucial role, right, to be able to do that, to make those efficiencies, right, to make production more localized with continents and countries. Yeah, that obviously is the mega trend that's happening, I think, across manufacturing and impacting B2B e-commerce. Just speaking about the latest trends in e-commerce, what's your take? I know we've talked about this before, particularly with, I mentioned configurators. That's always going to be, how do you make it better, right? What are the other trends, in search? What are you seeing in B2B e-commerce that's really popular these days?
I'd say that search is a general, like it's a crucial factor for every B2B commerce. So maybe it's not a trend because it's something like a ongoing effect of polishing something that have been already there, but it needs to be better and better. And by search, for our listeners, I would like to explain that there is something like quick search, which is very popular in B2B commerce, which means that you can simply put an SKU, so the unique number of a product, in the search, and then you got it very quickly, and you can make the order based on your previous orders as well. So it is like when you try to browse for a t-shirt in B2C commerce, you watch sometimes dozens of them before you choose one. And in B2B commerce, it's not about it. It's very often about supplying, the same companies with the same products on the monthly basis, for example. So the orders have to be repeated. So the search needs to be very fluent, very fast. So I can say that definitely the development of search as a feature, also polishing it with AI and everything around it that make you find the products faster. This is definitely something that is a developing trend. I'd also say that there is a trend that probably isn't to be found in any research, but from my private observation, is the general polishing of UI and UX of B2B e-commerce. So we talked about it, right? That B2B e-commerce is so ugly because why would you make a beautiful website for pipes? I mean, nobody wants
right.
nobody wants to watch beautiful pipes, right? But all of people that need to buy them, they need them to be found fast and need to be delivered fast and be very precise in the product descriptions, which are super crucial if you take into account all the dimensions of the pipes, everything that comes with a specification of a product, to put it simple. So before it was totally neglected, but as today, like the recent few years, I can see the trend to make B2B commerce more human oriented, like to kind of get into, like, empathically enough, get into the consumer, because somebody who is buying in B2B commerce, sometimes it's a salesman from another company, but it's a human as well. So he needs to have a nice experience, buying ugly products. So this is a trend to me.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because the speed thing, by the way, the quick search, absolutely critical, right? I mean, especially when you have SKUs, like you can't do that in B2C e-commerce, right? You can't put a SKU into a search item, and then it pops up with the item itself, right? In B2B, like and there's, to your point about repeat orders. So quick search is actually really an ability to facilitate a buyer to, maybe address these repeat orders, right? So like sometimes they don't have it written down and they just remember it and they just want to see it very quickly. So I totally understand that. And I think something about the human element that you mentioned, really interesting, because you know what? A lot of these, salespersons or representatives of distributors, distributor reps, they're humans. They buy on B2C sites. They're used to the experience of B2C, right? And so that translates, like their expectations, on the B2C, I think are now translating into, their experiences in the B2B sites as well, right? So it makes sense that they're going to have the same expectations, on these e-commerce sites.
Yeah, yeah. And I would add to that also the internal systems. So maybe it's not a trend. It's something that needed to be digitalized, needed to be integrated with the commerce part, because internal systems like ERPs or some warehouse management systems or some specific custom built machine park systems, they need to be integrated with e-commerce to fetch you the freshest state of a product or a warehouse or whatever. And I can see that these integrations and let's say some standards used for these integrations are also better and better. So the trend is to focus on easy and fast integration in B2B. It is a technical thing, but even the API standards, message queue standards, so everything that make it easier to send one information from one system to another. Believe me, it hasn't been so easy in the past because all the systems have different way of documenting the stats and everything. So
yeah, I think that your point around integrations is really interesting because, I think and also your point around these aren't really trends. It's almost like this is a minimum expectation, like table stake, like, this is where B2B has to be, right? It's not a trend. It's not a popular thing. It's just a requirement, basically, a prerequisite almost, right? For B2B commerce that, these integrations have to be made easier, right? Because the systems, there's just so many different systems, the information, they need to talk to each other. The data, for decision makers to make decisions, you need to have this data up and in real time. So I think that's your point, right? That this isn't a trend. This is a minimum requirement that you need now.
That's why it's so hard to speak about trends in B2B, because in general this branch is so neglected that we have to keep up, and we have to quickly get to the standards of B2C e-commerce or maybe normal trade. Let's make it simple. Let's try to translate the trade that have been done physically into digital world. And that is already a big challenge.
Yeah. So Tim, sort of to our next question, really, as you know, B2B e-commerce in general really has an impact on communities as a whole, right? At Unleashed, we seek bigger impacts. We seek a greater good, right? And so we really want to sort of emphasize the things that we're doing that are really positively impacting, our local communities and beyond e-commerce. And, I know CommerceWeavers is the same. Unleashed is really committed, dedicated to making an impact beyond the bottom line. How is CommerceWeavers, if you can share, helping communities, helping underserved communities in particular through B2B e-commerce?
Yeah, and starting from the very beginning, I think you're totally right. And I would even say that B2B commerce is making bigger impact than B2C commerce due to the fact that it optimizes all the processes that are unseen. So there are faster deliveries, there are local supply chains that finally can be connected via digital. And as for CommerceWeavers, we are very proud to support one of the crucial company in terms of food production in Germany, which is the biggest European economy. And in this particular case, we have we are speaking about a B2B marketplace. So this is a B2B marketplace for the biggest association of farmers in Germany. It comes from the Raiffeisen Bank, which is it's very interesting actually, because it's a cooperative bank, and I think they were the inventors of this cooperative system which is nothing else that B2B is doing now digitally. They have invented that 200 years ago. Yeah, and the cooperative was that farmers from the region can have like assets together in order to have bigger power on in every trade, basically between regions, for example. And as of today, you never had a system where a farmer could order a tractor part, for example, or a fertilizer. They had to go physically, and make an order in the local distribution representative, for example, or they had to do a phone call. And now they have a system where they can click with a quick order to order the same amount of fertilizers as they do every month. They can also use a quick search to find a specific tractor part. So this is not a repeatable order. It's something that you do from time to time when you are a farmer. And also they can trade in between them. So this is the biggest impact you could possibly have on food. So everything that we need to survive and live every day. So we love this project, absolutely. And by the way, it's a fantastic customer to us. So I'm happy to mention that.
Yeah, food. Yeah, I was just going to just make a quick comment on that example. It's a great example because food is probably the best industry example of a local food supply chain. Right? Has an immediate impact on people. Where shipments are shorter duration.
Think about all this eco trend that we have for the last 5 to 10 years. Everybody's getting eco first, right? Yeah, and we also support like Silius as a technology supports because what I mentioned was like country-wise, so for the whole Germany, and there are also smaller marketplaces that enable local orders from local farmers. So if you want to have like a qualified, verified supplier of your vegetables, so you can get them every morning, and that's fantastic to me. Of course, it's a little bit more expensive to buy probably than if you went to to the normal market. It might be cheaper, but it's not the point, because here you have the direct communication as well. You have this sense of direct partnership, collaboration on the local society, and that's
And I would even say that actually it's the technology that helps to reduce the overall cost, right? I mean, the B2B e-commerce facilitation, the internal stuff, to facilitate the connection with the inventory management and all of those things, the guts of the business. We're lowering the cost of that operation, and then separately, of course, just getting it to market, right, is the other thing, and creating that larger marketplace so that you can also reduce with the cost of the higher volume. Yeah, no, I think that's a great example. I mean, in our example, with Unleashed, we work with the largest sporting goods distributor in North America to basically facilitate the production and the customizing of school jerseys, basically, right, for your high school football team or your high school. Now, is that B2B e-commerce? I think it is, because you're not really selling to a consumer. Oftentimes, you're selling to a large school, right, that has a lot of sports teams. So you're dealing with actually a lot of players within that one institution. So in many respects, it's like a business, right? And so we built that e-commerce site over a 2-year period. It was a labor of love and sweat and tears as well, but we got that through it, and we're generating. I think the client has generated something like 3 or 4 times more revenue in literally 1 year since we launched it in April 2022. So it's technology really ramping up, that demand and that need, for these jerseys, for kids. So to me, it's great on the bottom line. It doesn't have to be a compromise between bottom line and community, right? It can be both, right? And that's a good example of that.
absolutely. And by the way, you used also Symfony for this project, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, it was a back-end Symfony project with a front-end React platform. And lots of APIs, that we had to use, of course. So again, different, data points that had to be connected through API. Lots and lots of API to ERP, to the factory floor. So really communicating, the stuff that was being built in the factory floor, with the customer, and then vice versa, right? Because there's a lot of touch points and a lot of going back and forth.
which actually brings us to another topic that we wanted to touch upon, which is like why Symfony, what it is, why did you use for, maybe let's start from this particular example. Like, I'm very curious, do you remember why you selected this particular technology for this client? Because I don't imagine them asking you specifically, hey, Unleashed, you have to use this technology. Probably you were the one to suggest it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a two-way street, actually. The client had already known about Symphony, but not really well. And so they came to us. We also had very deep discussions with them in the very beginning. I mean, the key interesting thing is it was a decoupled architecture, right? So back end was different from the front end, right? And so I think the understanding was that we could leverage the key strengths of Symphony on the back end to really drive the application. And I think the number one issue was just there was going to be a lot of data. You needed a backend that could really, handle the amount of data coming in from all these different stakeholders, right? From customers, from salespeople, a lot of complexity there. The other issue was integrations. Symphony does a really great job on integrations, right? Really connecting with, ERPs like SAP, Oracle quite easily through the API, but also just, a number of other, third parties that had to be integrated in order to make this thing work, right? So I would say those two are the two biggest reasons: the data piece and the ability to integrate effectively and quickly, so the information could flow very efficiently.
I think this is basically explaining how important it is to have a standardized framework for your work. Like, for people listening to us, like not very familiar with all these platforms, frameworks, and apps, I think it's important to explain again, like what layers do you have in architecture development. So you have, for example, PHP as a programming language. Then upon it, you have Symfony as a framework, which is basically a set of pieces using this language to deliver web applications faster. And then upon this framework, you can build applications that I just mentioned. So it's like a third layer. And by the way, Cilius is a e-commerce framework based on web development framework. So you have PHP language, Symfony framework for web development, and Cilius e-commerce framework for e-commerce development specifically. So a set of Symfony bundles for easy and fast and standardized e-commerce development.
Yeah, I think you've just nailed it on the head right there. I mean, just sort of capturing the different layers. I think it's important for our audience to see that kind of structure, right, from framework to application. And Cilius and Symfony are able to do that, right, really well. One thing, as we talk about the Cilius and Symfony technologies, how would you say it compares against sort of a Magento or a Shopware? How are they similar? How are they different?
Yeah, first of all, Cilius is like totally unknown, especially in the US. So the technology was created here in Poland. It's very popular in France, for example, due to the fact that Symfony has French origins as a framework. By the way, in US you have Laravel. So if somebody doesn't know, Symfony and Laravel are like competing frameworks. Symfony is for more complex developments, Laravel for easier developments. Although there could be people that disagree with this statement, but it's a general explanation, and I think it's fine for this purpose. Getting back to your question, how Cilius compares to the platforms that everybody knows, so like Magento, Shopware. First of all, let's refer to Magento because it was like a benchmark for everyone. It's like Amazon is a benchmark if you want to do online sales. If you want to have e-commerce development, you need to know what is Magento. Magento was the first to actually deliver a platform for e-commerce development. Before, it was just languages and a lot of unstandardized development. So Magento defined the e-commerce platform market. But over the years, it started to grow bigger and bigger and more ugly in terms of very complex architecture and a lot of dependencies between different features that were developed in different time periods. And Cilius was built from another angle. So the initial idea was not to do the same mistakes as Magento did. So avoid these dependencies. So you mentioned the decoupled architecture for your client, and that's exactly it. Like before even decoupled and composable were sexy words in the industry, Cilius actually had this idea of single responsibility principle. So like every feature, every function in your code has to be solely responsible for itself. So like, and that also brings us to testing. So it's easier to test such an application where a tester knows that if something is broken here, it's broken here and nowhere else, or if it affects something else, the root of this influence is very easily to be defined, and that so the bug can be found faster and fixed easier. So
Immediately.
Cilius
Yeah.
Cilius is set of bricks, and Magento, for example, is just a large all-in-one system. So I would make this as a key specification, key difference here, this dimension of all-in-one on one hand and decoupled on the other hand. Shopware is like better Magento. So it's a fairly boxed system, like off-the-shelf solution that also uses Symfony, by the way, but uses it differently. So Shopware idea is to have out-of-the-box solution, like something that you can basically buy on a monthly subscription, and as a customer, you don't have to think about anything else. So you have the infrastructure covered, hosting. Marketers can easily click through the system. CMS is very nice. So Shopware is more like user-friendly,
Right.
but at the same time, its disadvantage is that it's more difficult to customize Shopware, and Magento is even more difficult to customize. So Cilius was created firstly as a developer experience tool, and the others, Magento, Shopware, and many others, are user-oriented tool. So it might not sound great for a user listening to us for at this very moment, but if you think about it, it's like B2B, something that is unseen. So with choosing Cilius, you're basically letting your developers or your agency having a better tool to deliver custom features for your very unique use case. And as we all know, every business believes that it's unique. It's very often not true, but for B2B, it's more often true. So this is the difference. So I would say Cilius is like, when Shopware is for SMB, Cilius is like medium market and enterprise. Magento is for everything, and that's also a big disadvantage, because if you are for everyone, you are for no one. And yeah, so that's the main difference. I could speak a lot about different differences, but I think it's enough for this moment.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing to think about actually is your point about sort of like there's a development recently in this business, right, about monolithic versus something a little bit more discrete, right? I think, what we're beginning to see is, or more recently, is a trend that, these monolithic apps, to your point, they attempt to do everything, but they do nothing well, so they don't do one thing well as a result of that. And I think that's where, because needs are often very customized, right, at the end of the day.
That's true. Sorry, but it's very important to underline that monolithic approach is great in a lot of use cases, and I mean especially smaller projects. So like fairly similar, like a copy paste project. So this boxed solution, as I call them. So if you are a small e-commerce, go for monolith, because it's easy. You have everything packed together. Architecture is very much packed as well. Development and maintenance is also easier. But the larger you are, the more complex your business is, the worse it is for the monolith. So because more applications come into place. I've heard a very nice statement from one of our clients in France. He called it a digital pizza. So there is something like in development nowadays, if you think about medium market and enterprise, every merchant, every company has at least 7 to 15 crucial applications to operate digitally. And it's a pizza of applications connected together. And e-commerce is just a little part in it. Or maybe it's like a facilitator of all the information flowing and coming to the end customer, via the interface.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's interesting. Like, that's a great visualization, right? Each slice of a pizza represents a different part. E-commerce is just one part of that, of course, right? And I think what's interesting about this whole trend of this monolithic for smaller players, whereas you want something a little bit more custom, it does raise a question about the future moving forward, which is are custom bespoke solutions, B2B e-commerce solutions, better than the that are off the shelf? Because often a lot of monolithic tends to be off the shelf too. So what's your point? What's your kind of feedback there? Between custom bespoke versus something that's a little bit more off the shelf. And what do you move it more going forward? Because I think this also goes to the commoditization trend, right?
Yeah, I think like every fresh thing, every thing that people keep on repeating turns into a commodity at some point, because if technology vendors observe the market, they can design a system that can meet the expectations of many different customers. And I think at this very moment, B2B is in the stage of early growth, or maybe getting to the middle of the curve. So the commodity will come, and it's already coming. So there are more and more applications, off-the-shelf applications, that solve B2B commerce problems. But to my mind, B2B commerce, B2B2C, B2B2B, there are so many different models. If you think about the supply chains and everything, there is complexity always. There is a need for custom applications. Sometimes it's not an e-commerce application specifically. And I think it's also important to speak about it, that there are side applications, like middlewares or some specially designed custom apps that make the 3D configuration simpler. Some engines, that you cannot even see, and they are used in a process of making a B2B order. So here, innovation is there, and it's always custom. Like, of course, you can buy a 3D product configurator. You can subscribe to it. You can buy it, but then you're gonna have to customize it, because it will be missing one feature. And if you buy it and you are like totally dependent on this vendor, you probably cannot customize anything. You cannot even ask your developer to customize it, because these vendors do not, provide the APIs. Their politics is not to give the access, for the broad audience of developers. And this is also the difference between open source, that I believe is more innovative, than closed source. So yeah, there are many verticals here, but I think in general, yeah, B2B is slowly getting into commodity, but it will always need custom bespoke solutions. So
Yeah.
the answer is like both.
Yeah,
in parallel.
I think it's similar to like what your feedback before, right? About smaller, maybe it's okay to have a monolithic, whereas something bigger might require a little bit more custom, a little bit more discrete. I mean, I think the point there is, in the life cycle of a company, you have different needs and different demands. So it really depends on where you are, right? And so yes, there are certain use cases where certain things work better, and others that where where the smaller example is more suitable. Whereas, for something like a monolithic, but for a custom project for larger businesses, that use case is still there, right? And I think that's what you'll find. You'll find a constant demand for more custom applications, particularly among mid-sized to enterprise businesses, as they grow further, right? Because their needs, frankly, they're getting bigger. Their needs are very specific, right? As they move bigger.
Sorry, I just wanted to add my personal experience, that I think dozens of times I have advised potential customers not to choose Cilius, because I have noticed that they are not ready, and that their business is not there yet. Like, their digital maturity is very low, for example. So they, for example, exist for 2 or 3 years. They just make 1 to 10 million USD sales revenue. It's very often too little. So you need to. I think this is also important to underline the importance of consultants and agencies like ourselves. I'm not even trying to sell our services right now. I'm just saying that if you think about it logically, it's so complex out there in the digital world. There are so many different verticals: architecture, infrastructure, AI, coming to place. Nobody knows what is going on. Like, only people who actually try to keep up all the time daily. I think they can advise, and they are not always right as well. So it's easy as a non-technical customer, to get hyped and buy a software that you don't need because its marketing is so nice. It looks so cool. On the demo, you can see it solves every problem, but often it doesn't. So there is every time there is a specific application, a specific approach of development for a specific moment of your business development as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned AI. I think
Oh
that
yeah.
speaking of complexity, AI, right, added another level of layer of dimension here, layer of complexity, right, to this. So I know we've spoken about this before, where AI has actually been there for a while. It's not like this is the first stage of AI, right? It's been there a while. I think particularly as you're referring to search tooling, that kind of thing. What are you seeing in AI and Silius and B2B e-commerce?
What do I see, man? I see so much. It's like in Sirius particular, it's very early. I must say that I think there is a plugin being developed that aims to connect ChatGPT and OpenAI to Sirius, so that you could fetch very fast the product descriptions, for example. Like, hey, ChatGPT, make me a description of this dress, for example, and you always you have to review it. Like, you cannot trust it fully. So that brings me to another point, that I believe that AI is overhyped, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not, like a guru of digital to make such claims, but it's like you asked in the previous question about the commodity. So it's even before B2B. It's just starting, and the biggest hype came from the fact that interfaces have come into place, because machine learning protocols and machine learning libraries have been there for years. AI have been with us for several years, but we haven't seen it. Like end users, non-technical people like you and me, we could never really use AI too much, like at least not consciously. And for the last 2 years, thanks to ChatGPT, OpenAI, we finally got interface to talk to. We can ask questions, we can produce images with Midjourney. So the biggest change here is that somebody finally thought about human, in all this technology development. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that there's now interaction with human beings, right? As the experience of artificial intelligence. Yeah, I think, I'm going to leave that as an open question because I think there's so much there. And frankly, we don't know where this is going. There's already commoditization, right, with OpenAI and Azure, right, and ChatGPT. And I think the key for me, the key learning, because we do develop some AI tools for some clients of ours, is really, what is your use case? I mean, with regard to the AI piece, what we do at Unleashed, it's all about a discrete use case, right? Does the client have a discrete use case? And we can address that. What we cannot address, however, is kind of grandiose visions of AI. No, we need to have a specific use case. That's what we're doing with the AI tools that we're building for our clients.
I agree. I mean, if you don't know what you need, AI is of no use, because AI is like B2B e-commerce. It helps doing things faster and better, but you have to have specification done, you have to have a vision done, and you have to intelligently and with calm, review what the AI is fetching you. Like, don't trust it blindly. And I like to say that AI is perfect for people that already know what they are doing. If you think that AI will completely replace us, I think it's not true. Human is always there, needed to combine and to work with AI.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. Last question. And by the way, it's been such a great discussion here with you, right? Talking about Silius, talking about B2B e-commerce, just shifting from AI to the future of B2B e-commerce. I know we've spoken before about how you think, even in the near term, immediate term, about the changes that are happening in B2B e-commerce. I know we've talked about better trading experience and better user experience. Can you share what you think are the themes that aren't just happening like 5 years from now, but that are happening now, that you think will positively impact B2B e-commerce?
maybe that would also surprise you, but I really don't believe that the biggest changes happen directly in e-commerce. They happen around it. So for example, logistics. If you think about logistics 3 years ago, like before pandemic, it was much less developed than it is now. Like same day deliveries, parcel lockers, delivering by drone, for example, like they didn't exist. So B2B is integrating it and commoditizing it as well. So fast deliveries and also loyalty, for example. This is something also that comes from B2C, like that you can change your buyer points from buying a T-shirt in a brick and mortar store into buying something online from the same supplier. It finally comes to B2B as well. So it's a gamification, That's so again a user orientation. Nobody thought about gamification in B2B. Why the hell would you need that? But it increases sales, so why not apply that? I also mentioned user experience. I still believe we're at the moment where we don't focus that much on UX and UI of B2B systems because nobody really takes care of it. It has to make sell, it has to work. But again, I believe it's going to be changing faster, this focus on the user, because it's a consumer doing order on the other side of the computer. So why neglect him? Why neglect them? I don't know what else. Maybe you have some observation as well, because you.
Well, less of an observation and more of like thinking just at that strategic level. It's really interesting. Well, actually, one observation: VR, AR. Right. I know we're seeing already like augmented reality piece, right, in B2B e-commerce. It's such a B2C thing, but I think that's also gonna, translate over to B2B e-commerce. Yeah. No. Thank you for your comments on the trading experience, particularly with logistics. You're right, with all the pandemic generated activity there, and of course the user experience, it's also changing as well. No, it goes back to your example that you made, right, about the pizza, right? E-commerce is just one thing, but there's so many things happening outside of e-commerce. AI, right? The logistics piece, right? The UI UX user experience that are being impacted by the B2B e-commerce, but that are also impacting B2B e-commerce as well, right? That pizza is changing. Those slices are changing, right? And it's very exciting, as we enter into this new era. Any final thoughts? I will say I'll share my final thought, and I'll leave the last word to you as well. The one point you made about human, like at the end of the day, B2B consumers, B2B buyers, I should say, are similar to B2C consumers. They're human. So this is why I think we're seeing a little bit of sort of mimicry, or maybe like the lines are being blurred between B2C e-commerce and B2B, because the experiences are finally becoming more similar. They're converging, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, people are human beings, right? To your point. That just would be my last point, I think, on that.
Thank you. That's also my point. But I'm happy that we agree here. No, I don't know. Maybe it's because I graduated psychology and I think too much about human experience. But every time as a sales representative or a consultant, every time I went to a big company, to make a deal, I got familiar with people working there, and even like the big boss, like people that have like millions on their accounts, and you think they are somebody there, without normal human needs. Maybe they speak different language, and hello, there is no difference. They sometimes make the same jokes as you do, and and I think I would like to finish with this accent that there is a human on the other side of the order, of the camera, of the computer, of any device. And B2B e-commerce needs to understand that. So with usage of all these tools that we mentioned, AI, VR, loyalty, logistics, marketing automation, better CRMs, better ERPs, better integrations, we're all trying to satisfy humans, right? And feel good about it. So that's my final statement.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you for joining us on this Unleash This podcast today. As always, if any of the audience members have more questions or want to dig deeper into any of the topics that we covered today, please connect us at unleash-technologies.com. as well. We'd love to keep this conversation going and help you make the best technology choices for your business, for your organization. Until next time, please keep that technology unleashed.
Perfect ending. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.